The Idries Shah Foundation podcast. Practical psychology for today. Featuring the works of Idries Shah, narrated by David Ault. Welcome to the Idries Shah Foundation podcast. In this edition of the podcast, we will hear selections from The 100 Tales of Wisdom by Idries Shah. This audio is made available by the Idries Shah Foundation. Dogs and Men. It is also narrated that Sheikh Badruddin, the great artist, reported that one day he and the headmaster of the school, Sirajuddin, were walking with Maulana, when Maulana said to them that he really wanted to walk alone, for he was tired of the salutations and expressions of respect that people gave him wherever he went, and he wanted to be alone. He walked alone for a while, until he saw a pack of dogs on the sandy patch of the environs of the towns, and the headmaster, coming near Maulana, drew his attention to the peace and contentment that pervaded the group of dogs as they lay in repose in the sunshine. "Look at these dogs, how united and friendly they are towards each other, and we human beings." Maulana reflected a bit and then said, "Of a truth it is so, that those dogs lie in repose and peace now, but throw a bone amongst them, and then see the disturbance of the unity of which you speak. It is so with mankind," continued Maulana. "Men, as long as there is selflessness between two people, and the gain of worldly things is not considered amongst them, they are the best of friends. But let greed of the world be thrown before them, then note how the peace is disturbed and fighting, worse than dogs, ensues. Only those who set little store upon the passing things of matter and of possessing that which must die and perish can have a peaceful and reposeful life." The Coins of Gold. It is also narrated that once Moinuddin, the disciple, invited Maulana to a mystical meeting, at which important men of the town were also invited in his honor. After the listening was over, food was served, and an especial dish was placed before Maulana containing some very tasty food. Moinuddin had placed in the dish a purse full of gold coins, and had hidden it well in a heap of rice on the plate. This was done to test whether Maulana would notice it without touching the food. The host, as a further ruse, insisted that the food might graciously be taken, and he added that the food was bought from money legitimately earned. But Maulana sat without touching the food, and then observed that good food should not be contaminated by such things as gold coins. He had discovered the ruse, obviously through inner powers, and then he recited the first verse of a long ode. "My heart bears love to neither matter's sweetest things, nor their gloss and glow. Thus, forsooth, no golden purse for me in the dying matter's precious bowl." The host begged forgiveness of Maulana, and touched the master's feet in salutation and in expressions of shame for testing his master. The Hidden Dervish. It is also narrated that once the son of Maulana asked his father what was meant by the statement that the true dervish is always hidden, or, to say it in different words, he keeps himself concealed, whether that statement meant that he disguises himself by clothing, or is it a mental attitude of mind? Maulana's reply was this: "It might be both, even in adopting a vocation to hide the real pursuit of the path. For instance," continued Maulana, "some saints write verses depicting love, and that love people take as carnal love. Others are engaged in trade, such as Baba Fariduddin Attar, who was a chemist and had a chemist's shop in a bazaar. others concentrate upon writing on literary matters, and yet another might pursue other callings. All these are designed to conceal what they really are. This they do to avoid becoming the subject of pestering by worldly persons. There is another set of them who deliberately perform actions of which society might disapprove, so that people of worldly mind might leave them alone. And thus it is said that the Prophet has said that Allah has hidden the true men of great piety. Every device is, therefore, resorted to find peace of mind by such persons to follow the path, which is hindered by contamination with worldly ones, people whose sole aim and purpose is to gain material ends at whatever cost. That cost is the mystical and spiritual sphere and activity and love of that who is always, and will be always, and was always. And then Maulana recited the following verses. Knowing all the time, all, and yet they hide and seek. To the worldly gaze they appear other than what they really are. Not for a moment, though, many see them what they are. In inward light they roam, making miracles come to life, and yet none knowing what they are. Betimes even the lesser saints, Abdals, know less than what they are, their ins and outs, a mystery for all. Die before your death. It is also narrated that once Maulana said to his son, "If the people ask you what is your path, then reply, 'My path is to eat very little. Nay, my path is to die, that is, to be annihilated into the radiance of the divine.'" And then he related a story of a dervish who, approaching a house, asked for some water to drink. A very beautiful girl appeared at the door and handed an empty utensil to the man. But the dervish said, "I want some water to drink." The girl asked him to go away, saying, "I have given you your reply, for a dervish is not one who eats the whole day and sleeps the whole night, but the real pious one is he who sleeps hungry many a night and eats nothing during the day." Another Persian sage has said, "Eating is to preserve life, not living only to eat and yet eat more." Maulana said that the dervish, after that encounter with the girl, never ate during the day until his last hour. Similar effects must have similar causes. A shopkeeper kept a parrot in his shop. One day a cat overturned a vessel of oil and fled. When the merchant came back, he thought that the bird had spilt the oil, and he struck him so hard that all the feathers fell from his head. Some time later, seeing a bald man passing by, the parrot called out, "What oil did you spill?" Give me the whole, not the parts. A man went to a tattooist, asking him to put the picture of a lion on his skin. But this man was a coward. When he felt the first prick, he said, "Which part of the lion are you drawing?" The tattooist said, "The tail." The man cried, "Let us not have a tail. Do another part." The artist did as he was told, but the man screamed with pain again. And this went on and on until the artist told him that it was impossible to tattoo a lion at all if he would not allow any of its parts to be drawn. The King and the Slave Girl. There was once a king who fell in love with a slave girl. He bought her, but she became ill, and no doctor could cure her, because everyone who tried was too self-willed, and all omitted to say, "God willing," when they tried their cures. One day the king dreamt that someone would come to help, and a stranger presented himself at the palace, and offered to treat the girl. When the strange doctor sat beside the patient, he realized that the arrogance of the doctors had prevented them from seeing her inner state. She realized that she was languishing because she was in love. He found out by indirect conversation that she was in love with a certain jeweler of Samarkand. To produce a cure, he told the king privately, you must attract the goldsmith with a promise of gifts. The king sent flatterers to lure the smith. He came full of greed, and the two were married. In 6 months, the girl had recovered. But the strange doctor then administered a certain drink to the goldsmith, and he became repulsive to the girl. He died, and at the same time the girl's feelings evaporated. This story shocks you because you do not know the whole of the picture. The lovers. The Caliph said to Layla, "How can Majnun be distracted with you, since you are not more beautiful than many other women?" "Hold your tongue," she said, "for you are not Majnun." The more wakeful a man is to the things which surround him, the more asleep is he, and his waking is worse than his sleep. The Stolen Snake. A man stole a snake from a man who had caught it. The snake bit him, and he died. In this way, the first man was spared the snake's bite. The second man had his desire to steal the snake, but the effect of his wish being granted was to kill him. Jesus and the Name. A man walking with Jesus saw some bones. He asked Jesus to teach him how to restore the dead to life. Jesus said, "This is not for you. You have not cared about yourself, but you are interested in the reconstituting of another." The Sufi and the Donkey. A Sufi traveller was the guest of some other Sufis. They entertained him well, and he asked their servants to look after his donkey. He told the servants in such detail what to do with the donkey, how to groom and feed him, that they were annoyed, and said that they needed no such admonitions. This did not stop the Sufi, who continued to insist again and again what they were to do for the ass. That night he slept badly because he was dreaming that something was happening to his donkey. In the morning he set off on the animal, but it soon collapsed, because it had not after all been cared for at all by the negligent servants, in spite of the protestations. He thought that he could not trust them, and he was right. They thought that they were too good to need lecturing, and they were wrong. The Old Woman and the Hawk. A hawk belonging to a king ran away to the house of an old woman. She had never seen a hawk before, and thought that its beak, being curved and long, was deformed. She imagined that its wings were too long. She tried to look after it from her own experience of birds. The king ultimately found the hawk, and told it that this fate had happened to him because he had chosen the abode of an ignorant crone, however well-meaning, rather than the company of one who knew what a hawk was. The Sage and the Halva. A certain Sufi sage spent money like water on good deeds, without regard for where it came from, and he was therefore always in debt. At length, when he was on his deathbed, the people to whom he owed money gathered around him demanding repayment. The sage heard a sweetmeat seller in the street crying his wares, and sent out for the whole stock of halva from the boy. This was distributed among the creditors, When the time came to pay for it, the Sufi said that he had no money, and was in any case on the point of death. The boy was utterly distressed and cursed all Sufis and their ways. The incident made the creditors commiserate with the boy and increase the virulence of their bitter reproaches to the Sufi as a villain. The Sufi sage took no notice of any of this. Time passed. Later in the day, a large sum of money, sufficient to repay all the debts, arrived as a donation from one of the sheikh's admirers. The sheikh explained, when the repentant creditors asked him to teach them the meaning of this, that the money would never have appeared as a result of the desires and needs of the lenders. The whole result had to await the genuine heart cry of the Halva seller's boy. The Cow and the Lion. A man once put a cow into a shed. A lion came along, ate up the cow, and took its place. The shed was dark when the man went back, so he felt his way. His hands touched every part of the lion, and he thought that he was touching his own domestic animal. The lion thought, "He would not stroke me if he really knew who I was. He does this only because it is dark, and because he imagines that I must be his tame beast." The Sufi and the Servant. A Sufi arrived at a settlement of Sufis and put his donkey in their stables. The inhabitants were penniless, and they took the animal and sold it. With the money they bought all kinds of delicacies, and delighted with their good fortune they danced and sang. The visiting Sufi, delighted by their gaiety and welcome of him, joined their revels, crying like them, "The donkey is gone," again and again. The following morning, when the Sufi wanted to go on his way, he found that there was nobody there except his own servant. He asked him to bring his donkey. The servant explained that the Sufis had taken the donkey away. "Why did you not tell me, since you were in charge of it?" demanded the Sufi. "I went frequently to tell you, but each time I approached you, you were calling out, 'The donkey is gone,' so I thought that you already knew what had happened to it," his servant explained. The Sufi realized that his imitative behavior had been the cause of his loss. This podcast is copyright 2018, the Idries Shah Foundation.